uneducated, poorly informed, disrespectful, bonkers. Not things you'd like to think were associated with one of the UK's elite education establishments. Yet pupils from the Student Union at Cambridge University have voted not to support a motion calling for the commemoration of Remembrance Day, claiming it glorifies war. Amending the motion, activists want to abolish anything to do with British war veterans, Remembrance Day and even the poppy. To me, this illustrates just how our education system is failing by letting slip basic values and standards. Respect, understanding and gratitude are all completely missing from the modern-day curriculum. Generations of brave men and women, some in their teams, have afforded these young people the liberty they now flaunt. If I could teach these wayward miscreants one lesson, it would be that there has never been peace unless it was fought for. Their freedom has been paid for with the blood of the brave. Understand that war is not glorious, but our dead are.
You can't help but respect what you said, Phil, and let me add one extra point to your argument, which is that the Poppy Appeal last year raised £46.6 million for good causes, particularly disabled veterans. They're aiming for 50 million this year, and I hope that they get it. I'll certainly be buying a poppy. But your underlying point, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that this is a kind of insult to British values, the most fundamental of which is free speech, and then tick them off for expressing their freedom of speech. This is not the first time this has happened. You're under 50, so you're far too young to really have this as a kind of a reference. But back in 1933, the Oxford Union Society, the debating society at Oxford, and actually Cambridge, debated a motion that said that the motion was this House will fight for king and country, and that both Cambridge and Oxford defeated that. It was a tremendous scandal. Churchill wrote later that he thought it encouraged the Germans and Japanese to believe that we would not fight. But I think you cannot say that those young people, who, by the way, many of them did actually go and fight, should not have the right to express that or be ticked off for taking the view, which was, I think, a valid and legitimate, though wrong, pacifist position. Yeah, I think that their view, and this was the underlying point that I made, is that their view is not based on... They're not educated properly. They don't get given... your freedom of speech, as you keep battering on about, is based on what you're taught and what you're grown up with, OK? And, like I say, basic values are missing. There just doesn't seem to be there anymore. But they may just disagree. They may just disagree with you, Phil.
Can I introduce some people who definitely understand the context you're talking about, because they are veterans themselves? And this is a clip from Veterans for Peace and what they think about it.
Every Remembrance Sunday, we, Veterans for Peace, walk to the Cenotaph in London under the banner Never Again, as a reminder of what has gone before, and with a determination that never again will our children or future generations inflict on others or experience themselves the horror and pity of war.
The reality is, Phil, that there are people who have, like you, fought in wars and been willing to make that sacrifice, who now are also worried that the poppy is sending the wrong message. And they're not against remembering those who fought. They're saying they want to prevent further wars. I wear a poppy. I wear a poppy, and I choose to remember in that way. But I really want to add to what Trevor's been saying, which is that one of the sacrifices that I so appreciate that men and women who died made was for us to have the freedom to express the views and the conscience we have. And so while I wear a poppy, I think that poppy would be meaningless if I were wearing it under duress.
Let me just say, right, war is hideous. And I've been in several war zones myself, OK? It's hideous. And I wouldn't bestow it upon anybody, OK, at all, in any way, shape or form. But unfortunately, nowadays, you know, it gets forced upon us, left, right and centre, where we have to go to war, OK? So where these... In the ideal world, we'd all skip round merrily and there'd be no more wars. And I'd love that. That'd be great. I'd be out of a job, but it would be great, OK? That's not a real world. So these people, these students, are not living in the real world. They're living out of what they've read in books. It's not based on anything other than what they've been taught in school.
We're coming in full circle here, because you remember we started...
Yeah, with you telling me I don't live in the real world.
But it's not a perfect world.
I know.
And have we been involved in wars? Of course we've been involved.
That's the point.
But there are sometimes... Please let me finish. The classic is the Falklands conflict. They had no choice but to go to war in that sense. And I respect that ex-serviceman. He's braver than I am, the man, and he's entitled to his views. And I do get the idea that people who fought in World War II, and indeed World War I, did it so that people have the freedom. I don't like the way that the students have acted in Cambridge. And just to broaden it out briefly, and to bring in, which I think is probably the most poignant clip I've seen since I've been working on the pledge, we'll bring it in just a second. There are students in Kent University now who have taken a vote that you're not allowed to wear a sombrero or cowboy boots and fancy dress party because that's cultural appropriation, misappropriation. I make the point because these people are of an age that 100 years ago they were laying down their lives, they were going over the top, they were being shot at by Germans and various others. And this week, just this week, has been released the most extraordinary bit of footage from They Shall Not Grow Old, restored World War I footage by Peter Jackson. These are the sort of lads, they had no choice.
We got so degenerate, so isolated, living in this mud.
And you could sympathise with how a rabbit must feel, because we were hunted by mankind, just the same as a rabbit.
You knew what was going on within your vision. Beyond that, you hadn't got a clue.
You didn't care how the war was going, whether you were winning. You weren't bothered with that at all. You lived like tramps. You didn't polish any buttons. You wore any uniform bits that you liked, and nobody worried. All they were concerned with was that you were fit to fight.
These lads had plenty. They weren't worrying about sombreros or cowboy boots. They were worrying about getting a bullet in the brain. That's the truth.
You say that,
I think that's so monumentally unfair, Nick.
Why?
It is monumentally unfair.
Why?
Well, the clip you just saw there was of young men who'd gone to war.
Yeah.
Many of them, and we know this from their diaries and war poets, went to war and they hated it.
Yeah.
And they thought it was wrong. Lions led by donkeys, remember?
Yes, I do.
So I think it's so unfair to say that somebody who says we don't think that we should think of war in this particular way and we shouldn't remember it in a particular way is somehow should be given, as they used to say in the old days, the white feather, or as an idiot.
How can they speak for...
And comparing it with sombreros. I think that's really unfair.
I think we should hear from...
They're serious young people.
I think
they're wrong, but they're serious.
I think we should hear from someone. So this is the chair of the Cambridge University. It's Timur Koskin. Let's listen to what he says.
I've noticed that not many students at all wear poppies around the Remembrance Day period. And we wanted to change that and raise as much money for our veterans' charities and raise awareness on this important issue. Much to our surprise, the motion was overwhelmingly rejected by the council on the grounds that it might be offensive to international students.
He's the chair of the Conservative Association at the university. Just need to make that plain. Just to make that plain.
You've made it very clear now.
Okay,
Thank you. So that is what frustrates me. So the reason that the motion was not passed is because it might be offensive to international students. I don't understand why we live in this world where we are so afraid to offend people, because if an international student wishes to take offence, take offence. So what? That's your choice. Because when you actually look at what the poppy represents, so this is from the British Legion, they say that to them the poppy represents the sacrifices and contributions our armed forces community have made in the defence of freedom. Now, to me, that is fundamentally important, and it is something that you should be respecting and thankful for and grateful for. And to say, actually, we're not going to show that gratitude because we might offend somebody over there, I couldn't care less about offending somebody.
Can we give the last word? Barbara Windsor.
You can, but it's
a
not
quick
the last
shout.
word.
All right, we won't give the last word, but we'll give old Barbs a shout. Go on, Barbs, what you got to say, love?
And Babs, what would you say to those who don't want to wear a poppy?
I can go sod off for all I care.
You tell them they can sod
She
off.
did get the last
There's
word.
a sophisticated, proper answer.
Right, well, that's nearly it for this week. But before we go, there's just time for this, because there's no shortage of advice for members of the Tory cabinet at the moment, with everybody piling in to offer their views on what ministers should do about Brexit. But there's one person whose advice was rather different from the rest. This is what Michael Gove's wife, Sarah Vine, had to say about Theresa May's words on last week's Andrew Marr show.
She is tenacious, she is calm, she just does plough on. I mean, I think it would be quite nice if all the men stopped shouting and screaming and waving their willies around and maybe just gave her a bit of a hand occasionally.
Indeed, gentlemen, put those willies away. And for that diplomatic advice, Sarah, you are our straight talker of the week.